Adam Maher, founder and CEO of Ursa. It's a privilege to have you.
Nice to be with you as well. Looking forward to this conversation.
Likewise. Okay, so let's get straight into it. What's the elevator pitch for Ursa?
Yeah, so the elevator pitch for Ursa is even though it says Ursa Space, we actually don't build any hardware. What we do at Ursa Space is instead we build the software that really helps to try and connect all these different new satellite technologies with all the data on ground they have to combine it with so as to really be able to understand how to make sense of the data. So the way I describe it is you probably have heard about, you can task a satellite, you can bring that picture in, analyze it to look at an image, but when you detect, let's say we're, detecting a truck in a city, it really doesn't mean much until you know whether is it normal that that truck is there, and that truck, what's the context, the facility that changes very differently. And so what our software does is really help analysts understand, what is um, the information, whether it's, ground-based, satellite-based information that they need in order to solve a question. And, I think as we go through this conversation, looking forward to talking through a few different examples of how we really make that easy for the analyst to ask a question about what's happening on Earth, and we can help them, learn more about it.
Great. So I'm beginning to hear that perhaps a niche is something to do with Earth observation. Could you give us a bit more detail on the niche that you dominate?
Yeah, so the niche that we really are dominate is, so there's Earth, so we are an Earth observation company. So our specialty is, we have connections to over 2 dozen different satellite companies, use multiple different phenomenology. So radar, optical, RF, IR. So all of these different phenomenologies let you see different things. But we also have connections to dozens of other data sets that have contextual information. So, everything from OpenStreetMaps to various news sources that we can cross compare to what we see from Earth observation. And so, actually, to go a level deeper in there, our real niche is how do we take and understand what are those data sets to use? How do we fuse them together to give an analyst an answer to a question really quickly? So we've really come to this area where let's say, Earth observation is known for being able to monitor an area, let's say once a week for a very long period of time. Within that, our niche is we can do that, but what we can also do is you can ask us a question in the morning. Hey, what is the damage that has happened from a particular, let's say, earthquake? And within a few hours, we can start putting together all the right pieces and actually deliver something to you that, we regularly do this where we deliver out to first responders. Here is, here's a piece of information, basically a map that allows them to know where maybe go rescue an individual.
Okay, perfect. So it sounds like almost a near real-time geospatial intelligence service and platform.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay, and I think that's a good enough basis for mentioning how I came to be requesting an episode with you. It was in response to the LA fires and the fact
Mhm.
that synthetic aperture radar data seemed to be used universally almost in damage assessments.
Yep.
So I went finding companies that, yeah, were operating in that space. Okay. So then who is your ideal customer? How do you ensure you're always working backward from their needs?
Yeah, so our ideal customers is so really the way we describe it is it's any sort of analyst or operator that's looking for information, um, I guess, somewhere globally, right? So it's a pretty broad set of customers that can use these services. And so what we're always looking for is we're looking for those customers. Generally what I would say is you're someone who's looking for an area where there's hard to get information on the ground, and that view from space really helps, create a new picture for them. And so, for example, like you talked about that fire case there, right? So that's a good example, right? It's you've got a fire line happening, you've got clouds coming up. And so smoke cloud, whether it's smoke, whether it's clouds. And then there's all these other questions around there about, what roads are damaged, how do we move from point A to point B to bring, let's say, a lot of times what we're doing is we're trying to figure out how to bring, supplies from one point to another to support an area, what roads are possible or not. And so with that, right, so what we're doing is we're always looking for those individuals who have that real need to get that overhead view to say, to know how to move to point A. So that could be, usually in this case, there's usually some sort of, I would describe them analyst that is an expert in their field, or a lot of times geospatial analysts as well. And they're, for us, I would describe us as kind of that expert's expert, where they're saying, well, hey, we really need satellite intelligence, and we need someone who understands how to mix that Earth observation data with the systems that we have in order to support our mission. And so that's what we're looking for all the time. I think it's hard to put one niche. I think we've actually done 40 different industries in the last 12 months. So it's incredibly broad what we've been able to do.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So then, what is the skin in the game of owners slash management slash staff?
Yeah, so just kind of like any standard startup, we have as a standard startup, we offer, for, our managers, all the employees, we have the standard stock options like any, startup would have. So it's a really good alignment there, allows everyone to have, we are a very fast growing company right now. And so it allows all of our staff to have access to that equity. As the company grows, they get some of the benefit as well.
Yeah. Okay. Good to see some signs of alignment. Last of all, in terms of an overall picture of the context here for this company, how fast and sticky is growth?
Growth has been great. I mean, I think, in terms of sticky, we've had, in some of our customers in the oil and gas industry, they've been customers with us. Actually, our very first customer we acquired, oh, I can't remember. It's been a while now. So 7, 8 years ago now. They're still with us as a customer, still buying our products. So the product's very sticky once customers start using it. The other side of it is from growth. A lot of growth. I mean, over the last, we've been having, we're growing over 2x a year, which is really great and allows us to, it's just really great seeing as we keep delivering this, folks keep coming back, wanting more and more services from us.
Yeah, there we go. I've never heard a better job ad, given that you mentioned that stock compensation is involved in compensation. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So tell us about detecting the need for and producing Ursa's global oil inventories product. What impact has it had?
Yeah, so that was one of our very first products that we brought to market. It was one of those things we really had to learn about how to how to actually operate and bring an Earth observation product to a commercial market. So when we started this product, this was about 6, 7 years ago, we started working on this. There's a lot of things that we take for granted today in the Earth observation industry that weren't there at the time. So when we started this product, just all sorts of things, everything from the technology to the business models of how you buy satellite imagery, how you process it, how then you would deliver that to a customer, didn't, there really wasn't that some of the solid business models that there are today. And so we actually had to be at the forefront thinking about, how do we really expand this product? So it actually started out as it was 10 sites we were monitoring in one country. It took us all week to, acquire the imagery, bring it in, and process that and deliver it to the customer. So today that product has really expanded to over 1,000 sites globally that we'll collect, we'll process, we'll deliver that information. And it really has started, and having this type of transparency globally has really started to change that dynamic. When we started, not everywhere in the world was transparent about what their energy supplies were. But as over the years, with this additional technology, it's really brought that transparency to the energy markets. And so it's great to see how we now, as whether you're traders or whether you're creating some sort of economic policy for a country, you can now start to understand, okay, who has, what is the available oil resources, and how to whether you're a corporation or your country start to make those decisions on various policies or strategies on, where are you going to sell oil, where oil is coming from. It's really interesting seeing how when you're measuring such a large portion of the world's oil supplies, that impact that it has, to that global economy.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There's a couple of links I can make here to former podcast guests. It was actually via Umbra that I came upon you guys. And it
Mhm.
was in the episode with Umbra where Gabe mentioned that SAR can be used to measure the changes in height of the lids
Yeah.
of tanks in tank
Mhm.
farms. I suppose that's what you're talking about, that you had a set of 10 tanks or something at several
Yeah.
tank farms.
Yeah, it was 10, it was 10 facilities. Each facility had, it was when we started, it was 10 facilities. Each facility had a couple dozen to a few hundred
Yep.
tanks. And so what we would do is exactly as you said. So, at the time, the standard was using optical imagery. And so optical imagery, yes, they would look at the floating rooftops, look at a few features of those floating rooftops, and then you could estimate the amount of oil in there. Well, there's one really big problem with that, and there is clouds, right? So and so what would happen is there's whole lots of areas of the world where if you look at average cloud cover, and especially different times of the year, you could be 60 days in between there being a measurement of that particular facility. SAR isn't impeded by the clouds, and so what that does is allows you to look. I mean, theoretically, we could look every few hours if we wanted to. But in general, it means we can always get that, that weekly update at least in our product. And what that's due, and the reason why that's important is because, from a market perspective, many of the reports that are out there are probably monthly. And so if you're, let's say, because of clouds, you can only get every 2 months. It really doesn't have a lot of value to the market. And so that's why, early on, we really started looking at techniques to say, how do we bring real high reliability the um, to the products we're creating and we're delivering to our customers, such that, there's that level of reliability to know, yes, when we need this answer, we're going to get that answer, and we're not going to, necessarily be impeded by some sort of weather event or something that is happening.
Yeah, okay. This is the fascinating world of commodity geospatial intelligence, I suppose. And speaking of which, there's another product, iron ore stockpiles.
Mhm.
Could you tell us about standing up that product and again the impact that it's had?
Yeah, the product it's one of our newer products out there. And so what we're doing here in this particular product, it's very similar to the playbook that we're using for the oil inventories in that, the market need was for analysts looking for, reliable, accurate information about what, an inventory is. Oil, is the floating rooftops. Stockpiles, whether it's iron ore, coal, other materials, is really about there's, these big piles. If you've ever seen like pictures of ports, right, there's these giant piles or any of these facilities, right, that have them. And so being able to measure those are really is really important. And so that's where, and being able to, it's not just being able to measure them accurately, but it's also about that time aspect. How do you actually measure them in the time to deliver something that's useful to, whichever user it's going to. And so in this case, what we actually have developed here is we've actually developed some new interesting techniques that allows us to, we could actually measure these stockpiles every day. And so we don't have to, wait for lots of other measurements to bring up. We can measure these, so literally, where we actually started to get a lot of the use for us is we had various customers who are talking to us about the lead times of hiring an airplane with LiDAR to go fly over these facilities. Um, And I'm sure some of your listeners have heard this, like our own experience. It can be sometimes weeks in order to book that plane, get it, get all the regulations and do that. This particular technique we developed here, we could do this today. Like, if you asked this for me, we could go be working with some of our satellite partners, including folks like Umbra you mentioned there. We could go have this, we could go have this for you in the next couple hours if you needed, versus having to wait for an airplane to move it
Okay.
around.
This finally sounds like what all of these satellite launches for Earth observation satellites are supposed to be delivering for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's amazing to hear that at last we've got this sort of on-demand measurement capability from space.
Mhm.
Okay, so speaking of excavations and soil piles and things like that,
Yeah.
the largest recent excavation by the human species was a 150-kilometer stretch of what is eventually to be a 170-kilometer long Saudi city called the Line. So
Mhm.
I measured approximately 36 square kilometers as having been subjected to earthworks of some sort. How would Ursa go about quantifying the volume of excavated and stockpiled material here? How quickly could this be done? You've already started to answer that. And how much would this analysis cost?
Yeah, so I think this is a good question here. So yeah, basically there's a few different questions depending on the use case as to how we would approach this problem. So first I'll just start it out. This sounds like a question that we would get regularly. So we are, as a company, one of our product lines we do is, you know depends on the customers that we're working with. Some customers we'll call it, different things, but let's just call this a site monitoring. So this is an idea of, I heard something in the news, we heard something in the news, we heard some rumor from a contact we have, and, it's something that may impact our business, and we really want to learn more. Or let's say you're a news reporter and you want to report more on this story. So this is really regular for us, and so this is actually a very large portion of our business. Is exactly like you said. Like this has been the promise of commercial space for a long time is how do there's all these different satellites, how do you leverage those to be able to give these really quick answers to someone that's having this. And so like in this case, first thing that would happen is we have a whole system that we would take this in and we'd start to break this apart, start to really understand the problem of, we would look at this and understand, okay, well, what is it that, this particular customer, if you're a news reporter, there may be one set of things you're interested in versus let's say you're a construction crew and you're looking to say, okay, I want in on this business. I want to be part of this excavation. Or maybe, on the other side, there's all sorts of different use cases we've done, but in this particular case, we would look at that, we'd understand who you are, and we take this question. And we would start looking at that and we saying, okay, well, these are probably the measurements you're going to want to know. Let's say you're excavating. We'd probably want to know how much area, what the volumes of those are. Probably actually want to know what are a lot of the vehicles coming and going from this site. So there's
Yeah,
all this
it's
really
basically the
interesting, rich
largest
information.
collection of dump trucks.
I know there's a lot
It's a
of dump
cloud
trucks
of
there, right?
dust, not just from a
Yeah.
storm, which you usually see there, but from the trucks. Yeah.
Well, but think about all the other stuff too. So this is really becomes a lot of fun because we work with so many different suppliers of satellite imagery, right? So, the optical and radar, they're really great. Well, we can go look at the volumetric of how much has been removed, understand the number of trucks, things that are going in there, right? But now we bring in other sources of information. We can start understanding what companies are part of this excavating all of this different material. We have other sources of data that we're starting to work with. We could art, maybe, these are the first time some of this area has been uncovered, right? We can start understanding what's the material, what's the underlying bedrock and other materials that are in there. And that starts to give all these other indications of, maybe I'm a company that specializes in this, particular type of foundation. And
Yeah.
so you'd want to know, okay, when is it time for us to come to this site? All the way
Okay.
to like even silly stuff, right? Like what we've done before is, well, where do we need to send food trucks? Right. So that it becomes real, so there's all these parts of the supply chain that what we would do is we'd start to look at what are all the different elements of the supply chain that someone may be interested in. And what we do is we have a whole series of software and expert analysts in-house here that can help to recommend, okay, what are the data sets, both from space and terrestrial, that we could start to bring into here, fuse together. Like our average report for something like this, we'll actually we could fuse a dozen different data sets together. And when you layer them all together, you get these really interesting results and pictures about what would be happening at this area. You could start to say, okay, this is how much material they moved. Here's who's moving it. Is it on track? Is it behind track? What was normally there? And you can really start to get a sense for all sorts of interesting insights that are much deeper than you would normally get from just, let's say, looking at that static picture of just like, yep, like you just did. You looked at it and you're like, yeah, there's a lot of, I measured all this different
Yeah,
piece, but
it was very
um,
interesting. I digitized around the whole disturbed area.
yeah,
There were a lot of stockpiles too, so the materials just moved off to the side of it. Anyway, I realize we're almost at time. I think a
yeah.
lot of people have been fascinated about the kinds of analysis or analyses that are done.
Mhm.
So if you were to hire an apprentice, what qualities are you looking for?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the qualities I'm looking for, for me, I think it's always someone who's curious, right? Because if you just think about the description I just gave you before, it is, kind of, always looking for individuals who are really curious about what is, um, what is actually going on there, right? There's this, like I was just describing that use case, right? There's this whole curious about that supply chain. Well, if this is happening here, well, where are the trucks? Where are the trucks coming from? What are the risks that these people have to be thinking about? And then just, and I think the other quality I think for me in the apprentice area is really looking for individuals who one of what we're trying to do as a company is take these really complex geospatial problems and how do you look at these complex, so everything I just described, this is a messy process that the analysts have to go through, right? Like they may get one result, or you just got a result and you just had more questions, right? And so this is a messy process. And so what we are trying to do is, and I'm always looking for individuals who will think, who are willing, who just want to like sit down through, understand, and curious about that every step of that process. Not just about like the the interesting parts, right? Like the satellite or this whiz bang analytic, but what about all just the simple steps that everyone has to do and really understand each and every one of those steps of the process. That's at the end of the day, we can build something that for you, when the next time you can go look at this, I'm hoping to in this near future, when you look at this, you can type into our platform, I'd like to know this about the line. And our system can start recommending, here's all the different things you may have thought of or may not have thought of
Yeah,
that you
but
could use Earth observation to learn more about that area.
yeah, you're actually flagging a series of future episodes about geospatial foundation models there for me. So
Yeah.
thanks for that segue to those future episodes.
Nice.
Adam, that was an amazing quick fire overview of Ursa and the
Yeah.
power of Earth observation that humanity finally has through
Yeah.
some of the services you offer. So yeah, thanks for signaling that via the podcast for us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting us. And yeah, looking forward to the rest of the world having continuing this conversation and learning more about what geospatial can do for their problems.
Appreciate it, Adam.